Shmaya. Okay. Amazing. So let's jump back into Sichos Haran, B'siyata D'Shmaya. We are taking a look today at Sichos Haran, Kuf, Pei, Ches. We're getting close to the Reishes, and there are only 308 teachings, so we're about 2/3 of the way through the Sefer, which is really exciting. And we continue with this teaching, Sichos Haran, Kuf, Pei, Ches, where Rebbe Nachman says the following very beautiful thing, very almost revealing, like a vulnerable thing that the Rebbe says. Amar, he says, Sheplia be'enai, it is a wondrous thing in my eyes, imivim pidyon le'echad u'mesaprim lo'itzarai, that if somebody comes to a tzaddik and brings the tzaddik a pidyon, we spoke about that recently in the Likutei Moharan shiurim in the mornings, about the possibility of redeeming one's soul, so to speak, with money that a person brings to the tzaddik, and the tzaddik performs a mystical, Kabbalistic tikkun, rectification using that money, and it's as if whatever that person needed to go through on a neshama level, they're putting onto the money instead, and it's a pidyon for them, something like kaparis in a certain way, right? That also to take money and to say this is in exchange, to be poda our nefesh to a tzaddik. And this is what people used to do. They used to bring money, a very specific amount, and they would give that to the tzaddik to perform a pidyon for them. And obviously, when a person came to the tzaddik, they weren't coming for no reason. They were coming because they were experiencing some kind of pain, some kind of challenge, some kind of difficulty. And when the person came to the tzaddik to perform the pidyon, obviously they would tell the tzaddik, they would express everything that they're going through, the pain that they're going through. Perhaps somebody was sick in the family, or some other kind of challenge. Says Rabbi Nachman, how could it be that when somebody pours out their heart before you and tells you what they're going through, for a tzaddik, the tzaddik reaches such a madrega that he is able to feel the level of pain that the person himself or herself feels who is expressing to the tzaddik what they're going through. The tzaddik feels that pain 100% the same like the person who's actually going through it. And what emerges from the Rebbe's comments, says Rebbe Nachman, is Hushehu margesh hatzar v'yisurim kishabam lefanav sheyispalal ala choyle v'chayotza. When somebody would come to Rabbi Nachman and talk about what they're going through, the Rebbe would empathize so deeply that the Rebbe would feel the pain. Without any distinction, the Rebbe would feel all of that pain, all of that suffering. And we heard similar things, similar expressions from the Rebbe's mouth numerous times. Va'amar, and he said, B'tchila ha'yisi mevakish mi'iti yizbarach she'eya margish tsar v'yisurin shal Yisrael. Initially, it's just obviously a madrigal all of us need to strive toward as well, to even feel the pain of someone else, even on any level, right? Just to be able to contemplate this. Someone's going through something. I'm not physically feeling that. I'm not them. I'm not feeling what they're feeling, but they're feeling it. And so that we should feel a little bit of the tsar, of the pain that another Jew is going through. And that was the Rebbe's tefillah at the outset. And the Rebbe said very openly that in the beginning of the Rebbe's spiritual evolution, when somebody would come and share with him what they were going through, he didn't necessarily feel that pain. And the Rebbe was pained by this. The Rebbe understood a person needs to feel the suffering of someone else. To be able literally to feel the pain that another Jew is feeling. So the Rebbe says, Vayisim ispalel, and I would daven to Hashem she'argish tzarei shel Yisrael, that I should reach the madrega to actually care, to recognize deeply enough that, like the Torah Devara writes on that pasuk, v'yahavta l'reacha kamocha, to recognize kemocha, mamish, that I, not simply I should love someone else like I love myself, but to come to the realization that the love of another Jew is love of self. that all of Am Yisrael is one body. Is one body. Because all of Am Yisrael is one collective soul. And so even though, just like in a person's physical body, the soul is a unified entity, and yet different facets of the soul are manifesting in different capacities. The capacity for the soul to do this thing called smelling, right, is manifest in the physical nose. The capacity for that singular soul to hear, right, is manifest in the ears. And the ears are not the nose, and the nose are not the ears, but the soul that's manifesting in them is totally singular. So too with the collective Jewish nation, the collective soul, rather, of the Jewish nation. We might be in different bodies, right, different stations of consciousness, but it's literally one soul. So the Rebbe would daven to Hashem, please let me feel the tsar of another Jew. But the Rebbe said, Achshav, at this point, probably many years later, maybe many months later, Achshav kishe'echa mesarpa li tsarai. Now, when somebody comes and tells me what they're going through, ani margish ba'atzmi atzar yoiser mimenu. I feel even more pain than that person feels. Umamish, said the Rebbe, noitfim mimeni adamim. My blood is just dripping out. Migoidel hatzar shani margish yoiser mimenu. Like he feels the wounds, he feels the pain. The empathy was so deep. And this is an incredible thing. You know, sometimes it's a little bit easier to understand with parents and children. There you can really feel it, right? A person's child is suffering, chas v'shalom lo aleinu, and the parent feels that pain. It's painful to them to know that their child is suffering. So that's a bit easier because it's a bit closer. But as we develop and grow in our consciousness, then the relationship that we have with all of Am Yisrael is like the relationship between parents and children, children and parents, brothers and sisters. Closer even than that. So when the connection is so strong, said the Rebbe, you feel the pain even more than that person feels the pain. Said the Rebbe, it's almost like the blood is dripping from the wounds that I feel in myself, even though I myself don't feel anything. I'm physically okay. I'm emotionally well. But to hear another Jew in pain, because the Rebbe's consciousness was deep enough and aware enough of the true nature of reality, where everybody is connected, even though the bodies are separate, but the soul is the same. Says the Rebbe, I feel that pain, mamish, just the same way the person going through the pain feels it, and maybe even more than that person. Says the Rebbe, because that person at least could distract themselves. But the Rebbe said, once you get to a point of consciousness, it's not an inyan of distracting. It's really understanding the root of the pain, tracing it back to the lack in the Shekhinah, like the Rebbe speaks about in Likutei Moharan. And then there's no distracting. It's just acute awareness of the experience of suffering. And as an addenda to this teaching, Rebbe Nachman writes that one time somebody asked Rabbi Nachman, who was leaving the Rebbe, and he said to the Rebbe, please just don't forget about me. Don't forget me. Anava Amar and Rebbe Nachman, Sichos Haran, our Rebbe, our Holy Master, said, how can I forget any one of you? Every one of you has a place in my heart. And of course we know that Rebbe Nachman wasn't simply the Rebbe of the Hasidim that he had during his lifetime. The Rebbe said, I want you to know that all of the teachings that I teach are for those who are with us today, and those who have not yet come into the world, and errors that have not yet been born, me and you. So what a privilege to just feel this. Anybody who's attached to this path, anybody who's attached to this tzaddik, there's a makom belibi. He knows, he's aware of his chasidim, and he performs that role of the manhig, of the guide, of the leader. of the mirachim, like the pasuk says, "Ki mirachim of Yenahagim," the merciful ones shall lead. And the Rebbe felt this mercy. The Rebbe felt this empathy. Sometimes when we're struggling, it's in whatever way, it's natural for us to have the sensation that we're no longer worthy, that we're blemished. We're not the best student, and we're not able to implement the advice as strongly as we might have hoped. But all the while that there's an experience of pain there, all the while that there's a frustration that accompanies that, there's a yearning, there's a deep desire to access that which we feel withheld from accessing, we have to know that the tzaddik whose advice we're trying to follow himself feels that frustration, himself feels that pain. Because all of us have a place in his heart. And it's not like, so the relationship is severed. On the contrary, the Rebbe's job is to encourage. The Rebbe's job is there to guide and to be present with us, empathetically, in what we're going through, feeling the pain that we feel. And of course, la'avdil elef alfei ein sof havdalas, like it says about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'chvoido v'atzmei b'chol tzoroisam lo tzar. The pain that we feel of distance from him is pain that he feels. And so, maybe on the surface there's an awareness of charon af. There's an awareness of ki avanesechem avdilim beina leveinchem, and walls go up between us and Hashem. But on a deeper level, we have to recognize Hashem is with us in that pain. Hashem is with us in that suffering. And the infinite compassion of the Infinite One is projected through his tzaddikim, who he sends to the world to enable us to understand what Hashem is, how he relates to us, what he wants from us, and how his presence is ever present all along the journey, the ups and the downs, the painful moments. What we should feel HaKadosh Baruch Hu projecting toward us is empathy. As Hashem is there to hold us up, Hashem is there to give us strength, and the tzaddik who's communicating that message of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there to stand by us and to hold out his hand and to say, you can start again, you can make a new start. I know how much it hurts. I feel that pain. That's what the Rebbe teaches in Sichos Haran, Kuf Pei Ches. Let's take a look at the next teaching, Kuf Pei Tes. And this is a very similar and related teaching on a related topic. And he says the following thing. Pam achas haya nechtoi zechern levracha mutal al eres nechali hapakin. One time, Rebbe Nachman's grandson, and he was a very young man, but he married young, and so his children married young, and he had already grandchildren in his 30s. Mutal al eres was laying on his sickbed, mechali hapakin, on account of boils, ababuas shchayres, dark boils. Rachmana litzlan, a terrible, terrible illness. And he was very ill, he was very weak. And Rabbi Nachman was sort of unburdening himself to his Talmud Reb Nosson about the incredible pain that it was causing the Rebbe to see his precious grandchild suffering so greatly. And then Rabbi Nachman told Reb Nosson va'amar, and he said, there are some things that Hashem does that just can't understand them. Which is interesting because in our theology, in our hashkafa, there are many ways of dealing with painful moments. And there are many ways of explaining things so that really everything might seem understandable. Because we can just say, so how could it be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is causing this person pain? It's a kapara. And you can say, what do we know about what Gilgul this person is in? We're going to see in a minute. We'll speak a bit about Gilgulim. It's all part of Hashem's chesed. It's a kapara for their averos, or Hashem is preparing them for some great, wondrous blessing. There are different ways of dealing with pain and with challenge. But over here, Rebbe Nachman is sort of revealing this reality that although that is all true, a person also has to know there are also ways that Hashem acts that are just absolutely incomprehensible, and no amount of explaining is going to be able to justify them in our heart and mind. It's just, that's why He's Hashem. If we were able to understand everything Hashem did fully, then there would be no gap, like Rebbe Nachman says in Likutei Moharan, between our consciousness and Hashem's consciousness. There's a reason that He is the infinite one, and we are creations. Iliyadativ heisef. If we could understand Him, we would be Him, like the Maimar HaChacham. So there are Darchei Hashem she'i efshar lahavina, that we just can't understand. And he brings us an example of teaching from the Arizal. Ki Isa, because it's brought she'etzel Arizal nestalik ben echad. The Arizal lost one of his children. Va'amar, and the Arizal explained shenestalik, that the reason this child had passed from the world is b'shvil hasoid shegilu l'tamidei Rabbi Chaim Vital, because he had revealed a secret to Rabbi Chaim Vital. Okay, and let's just read that inside where it appears in Shar Kavanas. That's over here. And this is the words of Rabbi Chaim Vital writing about sitting with the Arizal and learning a particular secret with regard to Hashem saying to the Bnei Yisrael when they were leaving Mitzrayim, Mat titzak elai, why are you crying out to me? Daber el Bnei Yisrael v'yuso. Don't daven in this moment, just travel into the Yam. And the Arizal explained the Soid al Pi Kabbalah of why that was. Says Reb Chaim Vital, Ubiyom shemarizal bir lanu hamaymer hazeh, on the day that the Arizal was sitting and explaining to us this Maimer, hayinu yoshvim b'sada tachas ilanos, the way that Torah was meant to be taught, right? Not in classrooms or buildings. They were out in nature. They were sitting in the field under trees. And a raven came passing by, and it was crowing as ravens do as it passed through. When the Arizal looked up, Ana va'amar achrav, and as the raven passed by, the Arizal said, Baruch Daina Emes. Baruch Daina Emes. Blessed is the true judge. What we customarily say when somebody passes. So Sha'alti es piv. So Rav Chaim Vital asked the Arizal, what's going on here? What are you saying? Va'amar li, and he said, Ki amar loy ha'ayriv hahu. That raven was telling the Arizal, Ki lefi shegila hasoid hazel l'chol b'nei adam b'farhesia, because he had revealed this incredibly deep secret of Torah b'farhesia in public. Therefore, he is going to be punished. There's a consequence for the Beis Din Shamala. And it was decreed upon him that he would lose his Ben Hakatan, his young child. Imagine that. That's what the raven had told the Arizal. So he got up and he went to his home. And he saw that his child was playing in the courtyard. But that evening, his son took ill. His son fell ill, umeis achar gimel yamim rachmana litzlan, and passed away after 3 days. And this is what the Arizal heard from the raven. That's what the Arizal said, Baruch Daina Emes, because that's what the raven, and the Arizal was able to understand the Sichas Tziporim, right? The communication of the birds. And this is what the raven had communicated. Therefore, the Arizal, the Rav Chaim Vital writes, whoever reads these words and reads the secret, be careful about teaching them publicly, right? And this even more than the regular standard approach to Kabbalah. It should be hidden. This is not the right place to talk at length about this, because everybody understands these matters. Right? A person who guards these secrets so that they don't end up being taught to a person that isn't fitting. Such a person is going to be respected in the heavenly abode. Okay, that's the source for this idea that when the Arizal taught this particular secret to Reb Chaim Vital, Nestalik. haben, right? His child passed away. Says the Rebbe, what a strange thing. Because of course the Arizal needed to reveal this secret. First of all, Reb Chaim Vital was really pleading with the Arizal to teach it. And based on what we know about the relationship between Reb Chaim Vital and the Arizal, if Reb Chaim Vital felt that he was lacking in a particular bit of knowledge of this Chachma of Chachmas HaNister, the Arizal had to teach it to him. Why? Ki Amar, because the Arizal taught, and this shows up in Shar Gulgulim Perek Lamed Ches, a very, very lengthy perek, a wondrous perek, really ayin sham if you can. Ki Amar Shaloi Bala Olam Kim L'Sakin Nishmasish Reb Chaim Vital. The Arizal told Reb Chaim Vital in no uncertain terms that the only reason that he came into this planet is to fix up and rectify the soul of Reb Chaim Vital, and he taught Reb Chaim Vital in Shar Gulgulim over there all of the different previous Gulgulim that Reb Chaim Vital had in the most wondrous way. He told Reb Chaim Vital that his soul in a previous Gilgul had come down as the Magid Mishnah, one of the commentaries on the Rambam, and that the Magid Mishnah cast aspersion on the authenticity of the teachings in Sefer HaZohar. And as it was a result of that, the Reb Chaim Vital had to come back and focused exclusively on this particular wisdom, in addition to many other soul fragments that Reb Chaim Vital had from Rabbi Akiva and so many others. But ultimately, the Arizal told Reb Chaim Vital his whole inyan in this world was to reveal the Sodei Torah that would rectify Reb Chaim Vital's neshama. And the Arizal was very, very frustrated, to say the least, with Reb Chaim Vital, that Reb Chaim didn't sort of just keep the Arizal to himself, but invited other people to learn with him. And the Arizal grew very frustrated and said, every moment that we don't have together is a moment wasted, because the whole reason I came down to this world was to teach you, and through you, the teachings will spread to everybody else. So says Rabbi Nachman, he didn't make a mistake by revealing this secret, and yet, and even so, there was a consequence. Says Rebbe Nachman, this is illogical, it's unintelligible, right? This is what he came down to the world to do, and he gets punished for doing it. But he would also get punished, right, let's say, for not doing it, because he needs to do it. How do you understand these things? Says Rebbe Nachman, you don't. There's no way of understanding this with our seichel, and that's okay. This is a really important point, just to go back. Sometimes, especially today, we have this impulse to just find an explanation for everything, especially challenging things that we go through, to explain them away with one explanation or another, great as these explanations might be, and rooted in the Sfarim HaKadoshim as these explanations might be. But sometimes it's also good to say, it's just a mystery. I don't know. And this is the energy that Rabbi Nachman wanted to communicate so much. Tachlis hayediyah asher lo neda. That the pinnacle of knowledge is knowing that it's okay not to know. I can't explain it. That's good. That's okay. Darchei Hashem she'i ef shalahavin b'seichel b'shum oifin cannot be explained in any way, shape, or form. So coming back inside, v'hamuva midvarav le'inyan atzmai, says Rebbe Nachman, applying Rebbe Nachman's words to what he was going through. Shekol tsar v'yisurim mitzar banav sheyichyu, all of the pain and the suffering and the suffering of his children. Rebbe Nachman lost 4 children. Hakol hurak machmasha oisik imanu lekarvenu laHashem yisbarach. It being given, like understood as a given in the world of Kisvei Breslev, that Rebbe Nachman was a Gilgal of the Arizal, who was himself a Gilgal of Rabbi Shimon, who was himself the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu, coming down to reveal new ways, to pave new paths, to open new doors. So the Rebbe was basically saying, same is true for himself. How much suffering the Rebbe endured on account of his desire to bring us close. And says Rebbe Nachman, V'afal pishu muchrich lazeh. Rebbe Nachman had to do all of this. Of course, this is part of Hashem's plan. That's why Hashem sent Rebbe Nachman's neshama into the world. The Rebbe said the very similar thing to his Hasidim that the Arizal said to Reb Chaim Vital. He said, mitzad my neshama, I have nothing more to fix up. I did not need to come down into this world again. I was only sent to this world to help everyone else. My soul is mitukan. Imagine that. That's what the Rebbe Nachman said. And he experienced suffering. Ki bevade Hashem yisbarach roitza b'zeh. Ki hu yisbarach choyshe machshavos leval yidach mimenu nidach. Hashem is constantly thinking thoughts, so to speak, and strategizing how to bring people back to Him. And so Hashem sent a tzaddik yisod olam. Yimincha pshuta lekabel shavim. The manifestation of Hashem's right hand, the proclaimer of Hashem's midas hachesed, the Nachman ha'amiti, the true consoler, in order to bring us back. Even so, and we can't understand why, the Rebbe suffered for this. This is the way that Hashem set up the system, and it's beyond our understanding of why this is. So Reb Nassan said that Rabbi Nachman was expressing the deep pain that he felt over this, that his grandson was lying there ill. And he said, he wishes he could swap places with the child. Let the child live. The whole take on all the suffering onto himself. And then Rabbi Nachman said, give himself a little bit of chizuk, but he said, this will be considered for me a benefit, that it isn't only when my grandson is lying ill that I feel this empathy. Rather, even somebody else's grandchild. Though maybe li pidyon, and again this is related to the previous teaching, and that person brings a pidyon nefesh, a mavakish l'spalel alav, or asks Rabbi Nachman to daven for that person's grandson. Yesh li gam kin sar kazem mamish kechala nizka le'el. The Rebbe said it isn't because it's my grandson, it's because it's another human being. It's because it's another Jew. And the Rebbe feels this empathetic burden sharing with everyone all the time. V'sipar az, and then he added, one line above, Gam kishe'echa me'anashen shay mekar misrachik atzmi chas v'shalom. This is also the case when somebody who is close to the Rebbe and the Hasidim, and then afterwards is distanced. Yesh li tsar kazeh mamish b'libi kechal anel. Says Rebbe Nachman, I feel that pain so deeply. And the Rebbe made reference to somebody who had gone away after already having been brought close. And the Rebbe said how much pain he feels from this, that the person separated after having been close. Shuv shamati mi ish echad me'anashav sheshama gam kim Rabbeinu Zal. Reb Nassan writes that I also heard from one of the other Hasidim that he heard from Rabbi Nachman in Ninzeh be'esh and estalik etz lebanei akatan Shlomo Ephraim zechron levracha. When one of the 4 sons that Rabbi Nachman lost, who died when he was very young, this son Shlomo Ephraim, who was particularly precious to Rabbi Nachman felt that this would be the collective of the twin Mashiachs, the Mashiach ben Yosef, and that was the name Ephraim, and the Mashiach ben David, that was the name Shlomo. And when he left the world, the Rebbe's pain was inexpressible. He told Reb Nassan at that time, and this was right before the revelation of Likutei Moharan Torah Samach Hey, he said, what can you know of my pain, my soul has been moved from this place and shattered into a million pieces. The Rebbe was just shattered, literally shattered. So this person was communicating to Rebbe Nachman that after Rebbe Nachman's child Shlomo Ephraim had left the world, Va'amar sheyesh lo yisurim b'shvilenu. Says Rebbe Nachman, I want you people to know I'm suffering for you. I'm suffering on account of the work that I'm doing to bring the world back to Hashem. And listen to this line that he said. It's quite shocking, but this is what he said. Halay Arizal lo gila ki imsaid echad hayla oynesh. The Arizal only revealed one secret, one side. Right? The Arizal, Shmaina Sha'arim, thousands of pages of the deepest secrets in the world. Says Rebbe Nachman, no, he just revealed one secret, and on account of that, he lost a child. Hayla oynesh. Mikol Shekain, Rebbe Nachman says, all the more so. Sha'ani gilisi lechem kol kach soidos rabis ke'ele. That I've revealed so much more than what the Arizal revealed. Now contemplate that for a minute. Think about the prominence of the Arizal. There's nobody across the entire spectrum of Yiddishkeit, the Hasidim, the Misnagdim, the Sfardish Geoinim, in every single area of the Masorah-oriented Jews, that the Arizal isn't venerated in the most remarkable way. I've pointed this out in the past. That when you open up Sifrei Halacha, Aruch HaShulchan, Mishnah Berurah, it's striking that these poskim are codifying thousands of years of Jewish scholarship and debates and primary sources, right? Psukim and Mishnayos and Gemaras. And then after recording the opinions of the halachic decisors, the poskim that come after studying all of those bodies of literature, from the pasuk through the Mefarshim, through the Mishnayos and the Gemara and the Rishonim and the Go'ainim and then the Rishonim and then the Achronim, all the way throughout history, balancing out all the opinions and then recording what the halacha is. Then in the next line they bring the opinion of the Arizal. Right? The minig of the Arizal, the anhaga of the Arizal, who is just one individual in all of Jewish history. It's a remarkable pella when you think about the hanhagos, the way that Am Yisrael actually do the mitzvahs. There's on the one side of the scale thousands of years of Messiah, and on the other side of the scale is the minig Ari, that have just as prominent a place in our hanhagos as primary texts in the Gemara and in the Rishonim and Achronim. Small things, but very prominent. Saying Oleinu L'Shabeach after davening, right? The Tikkun of the Arizal. You're not going to find that in Shas. Holding tzitzis at the time of Kriya Shema between our pinky finger, right, is from the Arizal. So this is part of the Arhan Haggis, but it's brought down in halacha from this particular individual. Says Rebbe Nachman, he can't hold himself back. If it's true, he needs to tell the truth. The Arizal, with all of his greatness and prominence, revealed one secret. Says the Rebbe, I revealed many, many, many secrets. But the Rebbe is hidden. The Rebbe is totally hidden. And to speak in the ways that we speak about the Arizal, Lesman de Polig, everybody understands that. But once we start speaking about Rabbi Nachman, something else. The Rebbe is still hidden. But this is what he said. The Rebbe suffered. He gave his life, his short, brief, tortured journey on this planet for you and for me, that we should be able to benefit and bask in the light of his wisdom, in the light of his advice, in the light of his teachings, in the light of his sweet Torah and his stories. It didn't come from nothing. It came from suffering. Suffering. Empathetically already feeling the pain that we would feel and endeavoring to provide us with a cure before the malady. Let's take a look at the next teaching, Sichos Haran, Kuf Tzadi. Amar Rebbe Nachman said, Shekama pa'amim tzir la'atzmai inyane misa. Many times the Rebbe would imagine for himself inyane misa as if he had died, ki'iluhu meis mamish, like he was already dead. Ache hirgish tam misa mamish, until he could taste a little bit, so to speak, on whatever level of that bitterness of what that would be like. Gamani shamati sha'amar. Similarly, says Rebbe Nachman, I heard that he said, Shebibenu Urav, in his younger years, he would imagine his funeral in his mind. How the people would cry, and his loved ones, and the speeches that they would give. And he held this image at the forefront of his mind. We learned something similar earlier on in Sichos Haran about the prominence of death in the Breslover atmosphere, which on the surface seems so incongruous because Breslov is usually associated with light and with joy and with happiness, and you see again and again, if you look deeply, that there's a tremendous amount of focus on the Yom HaMisa. And these two things don't have to be in tension. On the contrary, it doesn't need to be morose and morbid. It enables a person to anchor themselves in a higher level of consciousness when they remember and have in front of their eyes always that life is fleeting, and that on a certain level can unburden, right, this tremendous sense of gravity that we sometimes feel. On the contrary, to remember, it's okay. We're here on a short mission, a short journey. It's not forever. But we need to stay focused on our mission. So in order to help himself do that, the Rebbe would imagine his death and his funeral. And he would focus on all of these different things in his mind. And he said, it takes a lot of work. It's a meditation. And again, it might sound like super unhealthy and creepy, but the Rebbe says it's an avodah. It can be an avodah. To try that, to sit and to envision that whole process, which we will not be here to see. So all we can ever do is envision it. But that it should be on our consciousness. This is an eventuality, like they like to say about this world. You know, we can say lots of things about it. One thing you can say is that nobody ever got out of it alive. Right? Nobody gets out of this thing alive. That's a reality. So instead of being scared of it, shying away from it, freaking out of it, just to sit and to recognize that with presence of mind and consciousness, for the purpose of then coming back into life with all the more seriousness, but at the same time, emunah, and being able to bring Hashem into our lives in a deeper way. Sichos Haran Kuf Tzadi Aleph. A lot of teachings today. Pama achas nichnas labayis. I mean, this is just totally confounding. I remember the first time I learned this. Like, this is just classic. Imagine this. One time, the Hasidim are sitting around in the Beis Medrash in Uman. Rebbe Nachman comes into the Beis Medrash. Everybody turns around. The Rebbe walked in. Ana va'amar, and he stands there and he says, Ma lasos k'sha'ayim b'lifnei ha'adam har gadol shel eish. What is a person supposed to do when they're standing in front of a huge mountain of fire, and on the other side of the mountain of fire is the most glorious, incredible treasures? But the only way to get to the treasures is by going through the mountain of fire. We have to get to the treasures. But what can we do? There's a huge mountain of fire. This was the question that he posed. And it doesn't seem like anybody gave an answer. Right? People just looked at the Rebbe. What does he mean? What a thing to say. Just imagine him coming in, announcing that, twirling, swiveling around, and going back to where he came from. What a strange thing. A few days later, he was making reference to this dynamic again. The treasure mountain of fire, have to get the treasure, but the only way to get it is going through the... How do you... V'sachak va'amar. Rebbe Nachman laughed. And he smiled and he said, I already know. Now I know. Now I know how to get through the mountain of fire. And this, I guess this short little, very enigmatic teaching is almost encapsulative and emblematic of the whole derech of Rebbe Nachman. This is how Rebbe Nachman understood this world to be. There are so many glorious treasures, but the obstacles are so great. And the Rebbe understood that. He understood that in each and every one of our own lives, we have an oitzar, we have a treasure, whatever that treasure is, whatever it is that we're seeking so deeply, whatever it is that we need to feel whole, whatever it is that we need in order to enable us to feel full spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, to give us peace, to give us that sense of contentment, menuchas hanefesh, yishuv hadas. All of us have in our lives an oitzer toiv, yakar nechmad, ma'oid. And all of us have a har gadol shel eish. All of us have this mighty mountain of fire that makes it so difficult for us to finally access and achieve and attain what it is that we're after. And the Rebbe's whole inyan was figuring out a way to help us get there. How does a person get through this pillar of fire and make it through alive? How do we dance with our challenges? How do we embrace the obstacles by recognizing that they're part of the journey? That was what Rebbe Nachman taught. And this is V'sachak va'amar. I already know what needs to be done in order to get there. Because it turns out that in accordance with Rebbe Nachman's way of understanding and looking at the world, the mountain of fire is not in the way. A person comes to realize that the mountain of fire is the way. It is the way. In other words, it's not what's preventing us from accessing the treasures. It is what is going to enable us to access the treasures. It's the angel that needs to be grappled with before we achieve our visions. It's the steps that need to be taken before we get to the mountaintop. So this little piece with this visual of the treasures that are hiding behind this mountain of fire, and Rebbe Nachman saying, like, this is what I'm working on. How can we help people to be able to access these treasures? And at the end of the day, coming out smiling and saying, I know the strategy. And the strategy is what he gives over to us in his svarim and with his advice. What a privilege, to be connected to this kind of master, to this kind of tzaddik. Okay, Sichos Haran kuf tzadi beis. Pam achas dibarti imay zal. Me'inin ze she'ena olam rotzim lahamen shiyunim sam achshav tzadikim gedolim. What we were just talking about. B'ma'ala ma'oid k'ma b'daris rishonim. Rabbi Nassan mentioned to Rabbi Nachman, people don't want to believe that there are great tzaddikim in this generation like there were in previous generations. Everybody's happy to speak about the Arizal and to speak about the Rishonim and the Rambam and the Ramban, but about tzaddikim in our dar, no. There aren't such great tzaddikim like we used to have. Anava Amar, Sir Rebbe Nachman announced, and he said, Ima aminim ba'Hashem yizbarach, tzrichem lahamin sheyesh tzaddikim gamkein. If a person believes that Hashem is still here in our generation like he was in the earlier generations, you need to believe that there are tzaddikim in every generation. Ki kemoy she'Hashem yizbarach nimtza bevadai, Just like it is absolutely certain that Hashem, who is existence, exists because we're experiencing Him. There are certainly tzaddikim in the world. B'chol dar v'dar. And those tzaddikim come down in every generational era to serve the purpose of moving Klal Yisrael along. And here comes this Rebbe Nachman, this hidden tzaddik, who's so popular and well known, but is so hidden. Who says that Arizal only revealed one secret, and I revealed many, 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 many secrets. Yeah, there was a great tzaddik in our era. An Arizal-like figure who revealed brand new revelations of the Torah. It's true. By the way, the Ramchal writes something similar about himself. The Ramchal writes something very similar. He says that from Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai until the Arizal, there was no new revelations. Then he said, from the Arizal to me, there was no new revelations, and now I was sent to the world to create what's called Tikkunim Chadashim, and all of the different sodos that the Ramchal revealed. We had great tzaddikim. Tzaddikim from another time, from another place, in our time and in our place. V'havin ma'ayid, and a person should understand that very well. Here we come to a final teaching. Amar le'inyan mamain. Rabbi Nachman made a comment about money. And he said, Tzarech ha'adam shiur kol ha'koicha sheyesh be'inyan achila. There has to be a connection between the forces in the body that aid eating, consumption, and what a person does with the money that they make. So the Rebbe explained, Ki yesh kama koichos ba'adam le'inyan achila. There are a number of different forces with regard to the process of eating. Number one, ki yesh koyach hamekabel. First of all, there's the ability for the body to receive the food down into the esophagus and into the stomach. Right? There's the force in the body that keeps the food in the system without just allowing it to flush its way out. And then the stomach enzymes, the different juices, right, of the stomach have the capacity la'akel, to break down, to process the food. And then there's the ability for those enzymes and for those nutrients rather to be sent to all the different parts of the body, to the different parts of the cell. The brain gets what it needs from the food, and the and the bones get what they need, the calcium and the proteins, and all the different parts of the food are broken down and sent to the different parts of the body. And then finally, then the body has the capacity to push hapseilas l'chutz. That's a power the body has to be able to get rid of the waste. Kamavor calls it l'chachmei roifim, as the doctors explain all these different faculties of the digestive system. Says Rebbe Nachman, in the same way, kol elu hakoiches tzrichim le'inyan mamain. All of these different powers are needed for the processing of money. Number one, a person needs to have the koyach hama'akev. Just like we don't eat and then immediately comes out, right? A person's system keeps what we eat inside of us for the purpose of allowing it to become processed properly. So too with money. Says the Rebbe, don't spend the money you make right away. First, if people are desperate for the paycheck, and then the paycheck comes, and then they immediately waste all the money that they made. So that's the first thing. He says, we need to have what's called koyach hamachalek, the ability to send the nutrients out to the different parts of the body in the proper way. So the nimshal is, with regard to money, she is chalik ma'osav l'mekomes hatzrichim l'chol echad karoi kanal. Person needs to budget. Person needs to send different parts of the money that they make to different places in their life in an appropriate measure. And also, and this is on a higher level, the tzaddikim were able to understand what part of the money that they made was considered muvchar, was considered the choicest part, and that would be the part that ended up, as we're going to see, for tzedakah, yagil tzedakah. And as it relates to the other part of the paycheck, the other part of the money that a person makes, every chelik goes where it's supposed to go. As it said over about the Baal Shem, Rebbe Nachman's great-grandfather, sometimes people who were unseemly, uncouth, spiritually undeveloped folk called Rishayim would come to Rebbe Nachman and give him money. Va'amar, and he would say, all the money that the tzaddikim took in, it wasn't for themselves, they would give it out, they would distribute it to tzedakah. When Rebbe Nachman received money that came from tzaddikim, this money would be automatically used, he would distribute it very carefully to mitzvahs for the purpose of achnasas archim, and the same was true for the rest of the money. Right, money that came from someone who was not a tzaddik, this money would go to the upkeep of the horses and to pay the stable worker, things like that. That's how the money, the value, got divided. Even though you couldn't tell on the surface who this dollar came from and who that dollar came from, it was all the same and it was all mixed up together. But by the Baal Shem Tov, because he had this power of digestion as it relates to money, this is what would happen. They would all get divided in the proper way. And this is like the digestive system has this capacity to divide up the nutrients, and the waste goes where it needs to go. And that was the way it went. There is money that's an aspect of waste, so it goes to the lower things. It goes to hire the stable workers and the horses and things like that. Amar, says Rebbe Nachman, Iker Tavis Mammon, the primary taiva for Mammon is Misha Ein Le Kli Lekabel, is a person who doesn't have a vessel to receive it. And that's where the desire comes from. Not necessarily from their desire for great wealth, but the feeling of frustration over the small vessel. Kamoyle Ein Taivas Achila. The same is true for Taivas Achila. Right, a person who is able to eat doesn't have the desire to eat. They have whatever they need. But a person whose vessel is constricted, that causes tremendous taiva. Right, taiva is always for more than what the person needs. Then there's a taiva, and the same is true for mammon. And then Rebbe Nachman said, Ani yesh li kli v'chulei. I have a kli, I have a good vessel. And the Rebbe would collect money, the Rebbe would distribute money, the Rebbe would have nice things. Rebbe Nachman said, recorded that one of the things that drew him close to Rebbe Nachman in the beginning was the beautiful ornaments, the beautiful vessels that the Rebbe had on his table. And so the Rebbe had a kli. Rebbe spoke a lot about wealth as well, and the necessity to amass great wealth in order to access very deep perceptions of his hisbonenus haTorah, like the Rebbe explains in Torah Samach. But the ikar is to increase our kli, to increase our vessel. Generally, vessel, in the Svarim HaKadoshim, a vessel for Parnasa is the vessel of bitachon. Kli is Rosh Tevis, Yitein Lecha Kilvavecha. The awareness that Hashem will give us what we need. That gives us a kli. We should be zoche by remembering the preciousness of being connected in this lifetime with this hidden tzaddik, this empathetic tzaddik, this tzaddik by whom all of us have a place in his heart. This tzaddik who is greater in terms of what he revealed than even the Arizal, and about whom, so little is said, and so that so few people are really aware, and to follow the guidance that we're learning about, to be able to make it through the terrible mountain of fire, and to be able to access the treasure that awaits on the other side, on account of being able to remember that this life is not forever, and through this, to strengthen our emunah, to grow our kli, to be able to, Be'ezras Hashem, bring parnasa for ourselves and our families, and that the money that we onboard should naturally be divided in all the proper ways to go where it's supposed to go, and that we should bring tikkun into the world and lessen chaos and bring into the world more order and more seder and more emunah and more dveikus and more connection to Hashem, to others, and to ourselves. Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach. Okay, Yasher Koach, thank you so much for joining our shiur today, our series on Sichos Haran. Be'ezras Hashem, we will continue not next week because there won't be shiur next week, but Be'ezras Hashem, in 2 weeks, we'll continue as we go closer and closer to reaching 200, which, like I said, is about a third of the way through the Sefer. So, Ashreinu. We've accomplished a tremendous amount, and there's more to accomplish, and we march on with great gratitude and appreciation. Okay, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you so much for being here. All the best.
אני הבן ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני